Good evening, everyone, and welcome to It's About Time Writers Reading Series number 414 this evening. And I'm excited to be welcoming Jan Steckel, Gloria Nefertiti Jackson, and Sylvia Byrne Pollack, along with open mic readers in between. This is the next to last of our online reading series, as it is our intention to return to in-person starting with the second Thursday in July. And I thank you all for your comments in response to the Great Seattle Times article about the incredible force in the community that It's About Time has been for its 34 years of existence, and the support you've shown in making sure the library knows what a jewel this is. So the last month has been a really loving and very supportive time. Maybe sometimes every month is so powerful, and then it almost blows my mind, and then by the next month I've kind of cleared up. But looking over the cumulative power of the articles and the bios, 145 pages worth, just since I took over in 2011, really just made me realize what a jewel this is. It's just extraordinary who's been here and who shows up and what happens every time. And it was a really great article. And all I ever say is I'm just trying to do right by Esther's legacy in terms of what she started. So that's my marching orders. Okay, well, our first reader tonight is Jan Steckel, who was introduced to me by Julene Tripp Weaver and suggested that she join us. Jan Steckel's debut fiction collection, Ghosts and Oceans, just came out from Zeitgeist Press. Her poetry book, The Horizontal Poet, won a 2011 Lambda Literary Award. Her poetry book, Like Flesh Covers Bone, won 2 Rainbow Awards. Her fiction chapbook, Mixing Tracks, and poetry chapbook, The Underwater Hospital, also won awards. Her creative prose and poetry have appeared in Scholastic Magazine, Yale Medicine, Bellevue Literary Review, Canary, Syracuse, and I'll leave you to that one, and elsewhere. She lives in Oakland, California. Welcome, Jan.
Thank you so much, Peggy, for having me and for the nice introduction. And thank you to Ballard Library for hosting the in-person readings, and to all of you for coming tonight. It's an honor to read with Gloria.
Hold on. Wait, sorry. My apologies. I was muting newcomers and I muted Jan. I am so sorry. Please resume. My apologies.
Thank you, Peggy, for inviting me. And thanks to Ballard Library for hosting the in-person readings. I hope to make it to one of those someday. And to all of you for coming tonight. And it's an honor to open for Gloria and Sylvia. Ghosts and Oceans is my first collection of short stories. I'm going to read The Wild Boar Baby from this book, and then finish up with a few poems from previous poetry books. The story is set in the Dominican Republic, where I was a Peace Corps volunteer. The Wild Boar Baby. Down the streets of the town of Samaná in the Dominican Republic, boys like acolytes chanted, "Mani, mani, peanuts, peanuts," and swung sterno cans glowing holy orange to keep the roasted peanuts warm. In the smaller village of Villa Clara, 10 miles down the road, where kids squeezed fireflies for light, I lived 2 years in a zinc-roofed shack as a Peace Corps volunteer. That afternoon, I lay in a dinghy with Isi, a 5-year-old girl with a cleft palate, and her 2 older brothers. Leonilde and Aridio were purposely rocking the boat to frighten her. She clutched the gunwales and honked like a terrified goose. I told them to stop. Though they didn't seem to feel the shame for which I would have hoped, they stopped, and Isi gradually relaxed. The boys began diving off the bow, their laughter spangling off the water like sunlight. The key in the middle of the bay looked as if I could reach out and touch it. As I lay in the now gently rocking boat between the sky and the transparent water, watching the boys dive like otters and Essie grinning in the stern, I felt that for this moment, I was utterly, completely, and perfectly happy. Later that day, in a house downhill from mine, a father whipped his 5-year-old son, Moreno, with a belt for having hit a girl. The girl in question was feistier than Moreno, and I was fairly sure it wouldn't have occurred to the peaceable, smiling little boy to raise a hand to her unless she had struck him first. I could hear Moreno's hoarse cries, and it took all my self-control not to run out of my house to try to stop the beating. I told myself that the father was correcting the little boy as he himself had been corrected as a child. I told myself to be culturally sensitive and to stay put. My nails were digging into my palms. Juana, Rosa was standing in my doorway. There is a baby dying on the other side of the river, she said. You must come right away. I waded with her across the muddy river to the dwelling on stilts where Benita and her husband lived with their 10 children. It was no larger than the 2-roomed cube in which I lived myself. Once, during my training in one of the slums of the island republic's capital, an epidemic of measles had hit the neighborhood. I was learning to weigh children with a handheld scale along with the other health education volunteers. At the first doorway, I heard a sound and stumbled into a 1-room hovel with a single chair standing in the center of it. In the chair, like a pietà, sat a woman holding a barely conscious child. The child's diarrhea and vomit had covered both his mother and himself. The woman looked up at me, but not in an appeal for help. Her eyes were empty of hope, misery making an emptiness that I feared would swallow me as well. There was nothing to do. I backed out of the hut and walked away, filled with guilt, wanting anything but to go back in and see the woman and her moribund child again. Now the scene replayed itself, but with a protagonist whom I knew. Benita's children often came to my house to draw and to play with my hair, which seemed to them miraculously straight and soft. In the front room of her house, several women were keeping a vigil of the saddest kind. I walked into the back room to find a tiny baby on the bed, eyes rolled up white, chest heaving as he struggled for breath, lips puckered and limbs flaccid with severe dehydration. His forehead was burning, but his arms and legs were icy cold. As I put my arm around Benita's shoulders, she started to cry. With your permission, I said, I would like to take him to the hospital. Take him, she said, the tears spilling down the cliffs of her face. I turned to Rosa, who was some kind of cousin of Benita's, and asked her if she knew how to ride behind on a motorcycle, not hembra or side saddle, but macho, astride. She nodded. She said she would put on a full skirt with shorts underneath. I told her to meet me with the baby on the road in 5 minutes and went to get my extra helmet. When we got to the hospital, Rosa thought for a moment that the child was dead, but I took him from her and felt that he was breathing. Holding the child to my chest, I ran into Emergencia and almost straight into Candido, my friend and the head of public health for the town and the surrounding villages. Búscame un médico, I said abruptly, unintentionally using the familiar command form. Find me a doctor. Good morning, he answered stiffly in English. I squeezed his shoulder in apology for my rudeness. Se muere el niño, I whispered. The child is dying. A glance at the wizened form in my arms had already told him that. He shot Rosa a look of compassion and led us to Dr. Alvarado's bedroom in the back. I laid the baby on the bed. Alvarado was smoking. He kept blowing smoke into the baby's face as he examined him. Who let the child get into this condition? He demanded. The doctors always proudly spoke English to me. Alvarado pinched the skin of the baby's stomach, which had lost all its elasticity and didn't recoil into place right away as it should have. Dr. Calderon came in and leaned over the bed. He is severely dehydrated, she said. Go to the pharmacy on the corner and buy us 2 butterfly needles, maripositas they're called. Also get an IV duct and a syringe. The hospital had been built with World Health Organization money, but there were no supplies, not even for emergencies. The patients had to buy their own. The doctors were all interns on their obligatory year of national service after university. They were paid so little that they had to live in the hospital call rooms. They pierced him all over, first the backs of his hands, then the feet, then the crown of his head. Finally, they got a line into his groin and started running the fluid into him. The tiny, shriveled body in the bed filled up like a water balloon, expanding into a gurgling baby before my eyes. Everyone around the bed began to cheer, smile, clap each other on the shoulders, and pound my back too, laughing in triumph. Later that night, I ate dinner with Kika, the curandera or healer who lived next door to me. She told me I had missed something about Benita's youngest child. That child will be an idiot, said Kika. Her mother saw a wild boar while she was pregnant, and it gave her a susto, a fright. That's why the baby came out looking like a pig. She will never become more than a vegetable, a moron, that child. I stared at the fire. A piece of rotted wood thrown into the flames spewed out a shower of living sparks, winged termite-like insects caught in their own holocaust. One of them crawled, still burning, toward my toe. I shoved it back toward its immolated companions. After dinner, I drove the baby's mother's side saddle behind me to the hospital. I took her to the child's ward where she kissed and fussed over the infant. Only then did I notice the epicanthal folds of the baby's eyes. Like a palm reader, I opened the baby's loose fist and saw across the palm a single simian crease. Of course, with 10 children to feed, they had been letting the youngest child, whom they knew had Down syndrome, be carried off by diarrhea. Probably the father had insisted, but at the last moment, the mother had been unable to go through with it and had sent Rosa to me. Or maybe Rosa had come on her own, and once I was there, the mother had let things take their course, had let me take my course. I, like a hurricane sweeping through, had thought I was the answer to their prayers, the deus ex machina who would save their child. I drove back to Villa Clara and fell asleep with difficulty. It could only have been a few hours later that I was awakened by an ululation, a keening cry that sent me scurrying into my clothes and out my back door. There was Benita with bare and muddy feet, crying that she had awakened in the hospital to find the child dead in her arms. She had walked the 10 miles back to arrive at the village at dawn. She wanted me to bring her baby's body back to her. She asked me to take pictures of her so she could remember her. I brought her husband to the hospital on the back of my motorbike to claim and carry the child. Dr. Calderon at the hospital was very angry. She suspected the mother of smothering the child, though she said that such babies had weak hearts, so there was some chance the mother's story was true. She didn't want to sign the death certificate because she wasn't sure of the cause of death. All the father cared about was getting the hospital to bury the child. He thought that way he could save the cost of the funeral and burial. Calderon got even angrier and said he would have to take the body away. When I went to photograph the dead child, the ants had already gotten to her. Over and over again, I had to brush them from her cheek to make the picture turn out well, but they kept coming back. I snapped the photo. Blood turned to garnets, teeth turned to pearls, tears to rain on a zinc roof. Angelita, Angelita, you will never swing a sterno can like a censer and cry, mani, mani. Your father will never beat you. You will never leap from the bow of a boat between a perfect sky and sea. You will never catch a susto from a wild boar crossing your path. You will never grow up to be an idiot. So thank you. That was based on something that was at, pretty much autobiography. So the next poem is from my chapbook, The Underwater Hospital. It's based on something that one of my pediatric patients said to me. Dios le bendiga. Dios le bendiga, doctora. God bless you, doctor, for curing my baby of syphilis. Can you cure me too? I am broken and need to be fixed. When I was 12, I pretended to be sick and stayed home from church. In my vanity, I plaited my hair like shiny black snakes and put on my sister's hibiscus flowered dress. My uncle came by drunk from a lost cockfight. He raped me in the kitchen where I had made cactus candy with my mother and sisters. Blood ran down my leg like prickly pear juice. Because of that, I do not enjoy the act of sex. I lie like a stone beneath my husband so that he had to go to prostitutes, which is how my baby got this disease from me. So you see that it is all my fault. I want to be cured of my coldness, to be a good wife to my husband and not cause all this misery. Thank you for the telephone number, doctora. Dios le bendiga. And let's see, the next poem is from my book, Like Flesh Covers Bone. It's called By Babes in the Woods. What did we know? We thought we'd just be ogling together, people of all genders all the time, painting ambiguous genitalia in fuchsia, purple, and turquoise on the bedroom wall, marching in our Bitch magazine and Lesbian Avenger t-shirts, reading Alison Bechdel and Marianne Mohanraj till our baby bi eyelids drooped. We'd cuddle up like futon puppies, draw the shades on the 4th of July, watch Nosferatu while heteronormatives held sunshiny bake-offs and cookouts. We'd read our horror stories, homo poems, sexual histories of the garden snail at Perverts Put Out, Smack Dab, Queer Open Mic, The New Shit Show, The Godless Perverts Story Hour. We never dreamed in our wildest sparkly bi nightmares we'd end up with long-term healthcare insurance, forgetful parents tumbling downstairs, earthquake retrofits, a trail of dead friends, arguing on Tumblr with 20-something gender and sexuality police over whether bisexuals loved only two genders while pansexuals only fucked pans. And I'm going to finish with a poem from my Lambda Literary Award-winning book, The Horizontal Poet, The History of Our Love. If you were a skeleton and I were a skeleton, we would weave our bones together in a death's head embrace. I'd be able to get closer to you than I've ever been, my clavicle bumping up against your acromion. Every one of the 27 little bones of my hand would grab your iliac crest with equal enthusiasm. The chalky scrape of kneecap against femur, the click and rattle of your metatarsals dragging over my fibula and tibia would drive us to ever-increasing ecstasies of excitement. When you drew your phalanges over my ribs, I'd sound like a horny, bony xylophone. We'd grind, scrape, click, and rattle right through the night and the day and the night, wearing ourselves and each other away until nothing was left but a happy, exhausted heap of calcium carbonate, like a pile of powdered Tums or crushed Rolaids, ready to be pressed into a stick of chalk for a child to write on the sidewalk the history of our love. That's it, folks. Thank you so much. I wanted to tell you, I'm going to put in the chat ways that you can stay in touch with me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And all my books are available on Amazon and directly from the publisher Zeitgeist Press at zeitgeist-press.com. Or you can order signed copies directly from me via check, PayPal, or Venmo. My address, which I'll put in the chat along with all this other info, is P.O. Box 18797 in Oakland, California, 94619. My PayPal is at Jan Steckel and my Venmo is at Jan-Steckel. And signed copies of Ghosts and Oceans are $20 plus $4 postage and handling. I can't wait to hear the other two featured readers and to hear the rest of you at the open mic. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jan. I love the range of your work too.
You.
There is sometimes a misconception that this series was all just for poetry, and not true. So, and I'm so glad you'll be putting things in the chat because there's a lot of compliments that you need to have a chance to read now that you're not
Thank you so
reading the pages in front of you. So thank you very much. Long awaited reading.
Thank you, Peggy.
You're very welcome. So our next, now we're going to have some open mic readers, and we'll start with Justine Sutton and Sara McAulay. Then you're on deck. Justine, would you like to oh, you're unmuted. Go for it. Okay.
Hi, thank you. I so appreciate this opportunity to read, and I'm here at Jan's invitation. We're connected on Facebook. Like I said, we may meet in person while she's here. So yeah, thank you, Jan. Again, that was incredible. It's the first time I've heard any of your writing, and I'm very happy to have. So yeah, I'm going to read a little piece I was very honored to have published in an anthology called Writing Through the Apocalypse. Was in a weekly Zoom group where we'd write together, and that's where I know Julene from. So yeah, and she also is published in this anthology. So anyway, love the connections. Okay, I have a bit of a dry mouth, so I may be sipping water. I have a piece called Rainy Night in Wonderland. It's a damp night in Los Angeles. Despite the claims of pop songs and the rest of the country's disbelief, it really does rain in sunny Southern California. The pavement is wet, and car tires softly repeat the news as they roll by. In my modest hotel room on the second floor, I sit on a small square ottoman by the window and watch like a cat, taking in every little thing. I'm so fascinated, I'm just shy of my chin doing that chittering thing. Or a Cheshire grin, perhaps? On an adventure only 100 miles from my little seaside town, it's an unexpected treat to stay the night in LA before officiating at a memorial the next day. Kind of the client to put me up for the night so I can be fresh for the ceremony, not bedraggled from the road. If you don't know where you are going, any road can take you there. Now, my travel pipe and light are on the windowsill. I'm pensive and dreamy, and the street scene below resembles a chalk painting starting to run. In the grand scheme of things, I'm not far from home, but I feel like I'm in an exotic foreign country. Or Wonderland? It's a quiet side street, not a busy boulevard, and across the way is a restaurant. A small sign says Japanese food, but the big letters across the facade are Korean. I'm entranced by the colorful reflection on the wet pavement, green and red, then blue and pink, as the neon open sign flashes. Eat me, drink me. Moving slowly into frame from the left is a person pushing a shopping cart, heaped with perhaps all they own in the world. They and the cart are wrapped in what looks like plastic bags, and they stop to examine the contents of a garbage can in front of the restaurant. Not all who wander are lost. To the right are two high-rises, lights on in some of the windows, creating checkerboard patterns. They appear to be office buildings, but the lights are softer than the standard fluorescents and of varied hues, like a pleasingly multicolored chessboard. Watch out for the Red Queen. And in the middle, between the little restaurant that could and the mighty skyscrapers, is a building that looks completely out of place. Painted a sort of terracotta over plaster, it is wide and low, with a gracious veranda above a set of concrete steps. Sloping down to the sidewalk on either side of the steps is neatly trimmed lawn. The whole thing looks like it's been lifted in with a skyhook and dropped there from a college campus. And why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings. The rain is now going from a light pitter-pat to a medium but steady rhythm. A small figure in a long black raincoat emerges from the front door of the odd building and turns to lock it before hurrying down the steps, carrying a large satchel and a small box. Bending down, they set the box on the bottom step, then open an umbrella and walk briskly up the street. Curiouser and curiouser. I'm at the border of Koreatown and the Wilshire district. Beyond the neon, I can see the spires of an old cathedral. Tall palm trees in the foreground set the scene clearly. It may be urban, but this isn't New York or Chicago. Just a few miles away are the beaches, the canyons, the shopping malls that used to be orange groves. What this place has in common with every other urban center in the world is the shocking proximity of glittering wealth and desperate poverty. Always room for one more at the Mad Hatter's table. The plastic swathed figure continues on with their cart up the sidewalk. They pause at the foot of the concrete steps and bend down, picking up the small box and tucking it away before continuing across the rain-slicked street. I wonder where they will sleep tonight as the folks in those high-rises snuggle down in their comfy beds. I, in Wonderland for one night only, ponder the mysteries and complexities of this world and the soul we will commemorate the next day, who is now perhaps grappling with an entirely different set of mysteries and complexities. Why is a raven like a writing desk? As I turn off the light and get in bed, making a mental note to leave my dinner leftovers out on the street the next day, I can't help but recall perhaps the best piece of advice Alice was given on her adventures. Don't let anyone drive you crazy. It's nearby, and the walk is good for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to have always excited by first time readers and visitors here. Okay, our next open mic is Sara McAulay.
Yet another first-time
First
reader.
timer. There you
Yeah.
go.
Also invited by Jan. Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of poems. A great many years ago, I shudder to think how long ago it was. I spent 6 weeks backpacking in the Brooks Range in Alaska. And this has to do with that. Mount Dunarak, excuse me, is one of the mountain peaks in the Brooks Range. Okay. On Dunarak time, everyone fears something. Joe the guide. Solstice sun, yellow yo-yo on a string, circling Mount Dunarak, circling the rotting glacier, mango orange in Arctic light, river rapids lined with bones. Charlie, the Marine from Southern Cal, had been in Nam. He was afraid of bears, still more afraid that Joe the guide would smell his fear and laugh. I wasn't afraid, but then the swollen river snared my ankles, sucked me under, spat me out 100 yards downstream, my tongue gritty with silt, my teeth screaming. The calm indifference of it, the do not give a shitness of it. Fireweed rings a tussock meadow, 3 little tents on aprons of soft moss, lichen, coltsfoot, a dozen kinds of saxifrage, thawing permafrost below, impersonal, hungry as the river. But we're in the sky up here, far above the Arctic Circle, far above the tree line, glacier runoff sliding down the mountain's face like sweat. We're far above our lives below, analog twitch of all we thought we knew, replaced by the tick, tick of rotting ice. Yellow yo-yo winding time on its tether. Charlie says he dreams of teeth. What did the river taste when it closed its mouth around me? Charlie was the one who grabbed my shirt that day, who stood me on my feet. Now, in yellow solstice sunrise, I feel him listening wide-eyed to the growl that's not a bear. Tundra, a word like thunder. Stones tumble in the shallows, loons' cries stand the hair up on my arms. Outside my tent, dawn's arc sweeps, wind flattens fireweed, shadows peel free, becoming birds, becoming fears, becoming ice and air. And so, this one is called Snail. In the streetlight's glow, a trail of brightness slants across a flagstone path from one damp patch of earth to another half hidden by spent daisies. And I imagine all I need for safety is to make myself small and round, grow armor, grow eye stalk horns, a single sticky foot on which to ripple secret to wet secret under cover of night. Beneath the sun's accusing stare, I'll tuck my soft self small inside a spiral shield, cling to the cool of a stoneware bowl and wait for night to come. What do I dream of waiting out the day? Leaves and petals, moist and sweet, a thunderstorm, or silver crisscrossed messages, news of my borrowed kind. Curled in my spiral world, sheltered from the human gnash and squeal of what I've left behind, I hear the hours tick past. When shadows spread and thicken, when there's no sound but dogs in the distance, flap and flutter of a plastic bag tossed by the gritty wind, when passing headlights probe the night, crown lights winking red and blue and pass on by, when the asphalt river empties, beckons flat and black, cross now. This is as safe as it gets. So, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a great night for first timers. Thank you, Jan, for merging your community with ours. All right, our next featured reader, and then after that, we'll be hearing from Kathryn Gresham Lancaster and Bob Reeves on open mic. But for now, I would like to welcome Gloria Jackson-Nefertiti. Is a recently diagnosed autistic adult who lives in Seattle. She's hard at work on her upcoming memoir called A Different Drum, a Black, autistic, polyamorous, mentally ill, former fundamentalist Christian cult member and breast cancer survivor who just wants to fit in. And we all join you in hoping that that memoir will be forthcoming in December. Welcome, Gloria.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm going to read two pieces. The first one that I'm going to read is something that my therapist, who was the one who assessed me for autism, let's see, last year she told me about this blog that I had never heard of before called The Art of Autism. And they were looking for people to submit their work for Black History Month. And so I submitted this piece that I called Black Autistic Southern Elder Femme. And a piece that I'm going to read after that is something that I would call, is from the I can't make this stuff up department. So, but I'm going to start with my first piece. In 2019, 6 months before turning 63, it was confirmed that I'm autistic. I was different from everyone else without knowing why. In grade school, high school, and college, classmates would frequently ask me, "Why do you act the way you do? Why do you act so weird? Why do you act so corny?" I was born and raised in Gulfport, Mississippi, in a predominantly Black area. But being Black wasn't enough to allow me to fit in with everyone else. Classmates would frequently comment on the way I talked, telling me that I sounded white or, quote unquote, talked proper. I've read more than once that autistic children sounded like little professors when they talked. Their speech sounded formal and stilted. And no matter what I'd say, everyone would be quiet for a few seconds. Then they would look at each other and burst out laughing. It still happened after we moved to Portland, Oregon, when I was 15. The Portland kids would still comment on the way I talked, but since they knew I was from the Deep South, somebody would invariably say, "She sounds like Gomer Pyle." This was the 1960s and early 70s, where so little was known about autism, especially in predominantly Black communities in the Deep South. Since I grew up in a deeply religious and church-going, yet hypocritical family, I joined a campus ministry at Portland State University where I was a student. And this campus ministry, I later learned, was a cult. I thought, what on earth have I gotten myself into? For starters, I was the only Black person in the group, as well as the only Black person the people in the group had ever known. I mean, it's possible that a couple of them had seen a Black person at their high school who also happened to be the only Black person there. We, the student and staff leaders of the group, or cult, all lived together in an apartment building in Beaverton, Oregon, a suburb of Portland. Sometimes Janie, the staff woman of the group, would tease us female student leaders about which guy we were going to end up with. For example, Janie would say to Sally, "I see you with Daryl." And she'd say to Betty, "And I see you with Todd." Of course, they would blush and giggle and say something like, "Oh, Janie." This would go on until she got around to all the women. Well, except for me. Then the giggling would subside, all while I'd be waiting for Janie to tell me who she saw me with. But the quiet just made the elephant in the living room seem that much more obvious. Finally, unable to stand it anymore, I would say, "Who do you see me with, Janie?" Then there would be this embarrassing silence for several seconds. Finally, Janie would speak up and say something like, "We really need to pray for God to send some Black men to the group." In other words, she didn't see me with anyone. On Wednesdays at noon, we would hold an evangelistic type event called Sing and Share, or S&S, where I'd play the guitar with a guy named Brad, and we'd lead the group in singing Christian songs. And in between songs, people would share what God had done for them that week. One day, a Black man came to the S&S. As soon as Dodd, the main staff person, saw this Black man come in, he, Dodd, and some of the other guys in the group called out, "Gloria!" They feverishly started looking for me so I could meet this man. When they introduced me to him, all they knew was that he was a Black man and presumably a Christian. But the way they introduced me made it obvious they were setting me up so I could finally have somebody to date. I'm sure the man was looking for fellowship with other believers, but instead he was greeted by a dating service. He never returned. At the time, I wish I had whispered to him, "We're the only Black people they know." I'm sure he would have nodded in recognition. One Sunday night, Janie and I visited the predominantly Black Baptist church that I had been attending until she and Dodd demanded everyone attend the same church together. We pretty much did everything together. The reason for visiting this church was to recruit more Black college students to join our group. Janie presented a slideshow and gave a talk, and when she was finished, she opened the floor for questions. A teenage Black girl raised her hand. She said, "How come there are no other Black people in the group?" Janie became embarrassed and tongue-tied. She kept backpedaling and stumbling over her speech, trying to produce a satisfactory answer. I'm glad she never turned to me and said anything like, "Gloria, you tell her," because then I would have said something like, "Oh no, keep going, you're doing great." So Janie just kept saying things like, "We've been praying for God to bring more Black people to the group." On Friday nights, we would also hold an event called Rec Night or Recreation Night, which consisted of volleyball and then sing and share afterwards. Just like with the S&S event on Wednesdays at noon, Brad and I would play guitar and lead singing while people would share something in between songs. One night, a woman shared something that happened to her in North Portland, which is a predominantly Black area of Portland. Hence, North Portland has always been synonymous with Black people. I've known of so many white people who would confess that they were afraid to drive through North Portland at night. So, as she shared her story, she said, "Now, I'm sure that most of you know that North Portland has a lot of lower class people who live there." As soon as she said that, everybody in the room turned around and looked at me. And some were smiling, smirking, and or laughing a little bit. When she said lower class, she obviously didn't mean lower socioeconomic class. Otherwise, nobody would have turned and looked at me. What was especially hurtful was the fact that nobody spoke up and challenged her. There was just an embarrassing silence that followed. I think I just went back to the song leading after that, and I'm fairly sure that people roared with laughter to ease the tension they felt, even though it wasn't at all funny to me. If someone had made a statement like that today, I'm 99% sure that somebody would challenge it and say something like, "What do you mean when you refer to them as lower class? Explain that." Or they would have even said something like, "That was a racist remark you just made." One time, I was sitting near the student union when these two white female students saw me, and they began talking to each other about what they didn't like about Black girls. Basically, they saw Black girls as uppity and unfriendly. "They've always got such an attitude," said one girl, to which the other girl said, while delivering her parting shot, "Right, at least Black guys are friendly." But I couldn't believe the audacity of these girls to stand in front of me while clearly talking about me. Was I supposed to feel bad about myself because of what they said? If so, then they certainly achieved their goal. So many times I would be the only one in the room with a differing opinion because I'd also be the only Black person in the room. Occasionally someone would speak up and say, "Gee, Gloria, it looks like you're outnumbered." To which I would say, "I don't need you to tell me I'm outnumbered. I can see." One time during one of our occasional all-day workshops, everyone came and hung out at one of the apartments. One day, either I or another Black woman, Alice, who sometimes attended events, put on the gospel album called Amazing Grace by Aretha Franklin. As it played, the white people in the room began holding onto their chairs with nervous, shocked looks on their faces, as if they could not believe what they were hearing, or because what they thought they were listening to was so weird. Finally, somebody stood up and said, "I'm sorry, I need to put something else on. I hope you understand." Oh, I understood all right, loud and clear. I don't remember what he played instead. Probably Pat Boone. Occasionally, we'd have dinner with the parents of the other student leaders, as well as the minister of the church we attended and his family. I can't believe how many parents or mothers would apologize to me for not knowing how to cook soul food. When we visited one family, I remembered there being a young child at the table who was maybe 6 or 7 years old. She was really fascinated by my hair. "You know what?" she said. "Your hair's weird." I don't remember what I said to her, but what I do remember is that nobody spoke up and told her that it wasn't nice to talk to adults in such a way. Once again, this was a situation where I was on my own and nobody was willing to defend me. Afterwards, I told one of my roommates that I was hurt by that. And she said something like, "Oh, she's young. She's just a little kid. Don't worry about it." Since they had much harsher standards for me, I wonder to this day what would have happened if the tables had been turned. Thank you. Well, the story I'm going to read now actually is something that I read for the first time at the Saturday night special reading group. And I can't remember which Saturday that takes place, but the story I'm about to share is from the I can't make this stuff up department. In the late 1980s, when I lived in Portland, Oregon, I was a member of various 12-step groups. Well, one of those groups held a Halloween dance party in the basement of a church not far from where I lived. But since it was so far for me to walk to, I took the bus. And on my way to the bus stop, a black cat crossed my path. How symbolic, I thought. As soon as I got on the bus and was about to pay my fare, I froze as I locked eyes with the bus driver. He must have known that he looked just like Weird Al Yankovic, because without saying a word, he pointed to a VHS cassette tape that he had near the fare box. It was a cassette tape of the Weird Al movie that had just come out called UHF. I smiled weakly and found a seat near the front. In the very back was a guy who was talking to nobody in particular, but everybody in general. He kept repeating himself and saying, "Where's my thing? Has anybody seen my thing? I don't know where to find my thing. Has anybody seen my thing?" Thankfully, because the church wasn't that far away, the bus ride was short. When I arrived at the party, I saw all kinds of costumes. There was Pee Wee Herman, and I believe that Pee Wee's Playhouse was still on the air at that time. I also saw a dead woman wearing either a prom dress or a wedding dress. Me, I was dressed in all black with a pointed hat and a black dress and boots because I was being a sexy witch. At one point, a song came on to which most people seemed to know all the words. Not only that, but they knew all the hand motions. However, I was hearing this song for the first time that night. So I asked someone standing next to me, "What's this? What's everybody doing?" The person answered with, "Oh, that's the Time Warp from the Rocky Horror Picture Show." "Oh, okay," I said. I had never seen Rocky Horror before, so all of this was new to me. Actually, I still never seen it in person because I don't know the majority of the hand motions, nor do I know what I'm supposed to yell or throw at the movie screen. I did see it a couple of times on TV, though. Anyway, aside from feeling a bit awkward about the Rocky Horror incident, I had a great time at the Halloween party. But I have to say there's something that's still bugging me to this day. Was that bus driver Weird Al Yankovic or not? Thank you.
Even as you were reading, Gloria, on one of the little Zoom screens, a black cat crossed the screen.
Oh my God.
But there has not been a Zoom bomb of Weird Al Yankovic.
Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet. I'm so glad you were able to join us tonight, and
Thank you.
after giving us a preview at the last with the open mic last time. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you
you.
so much.
All right. We now have open mic with Kathryn Gresham Lancaster and then Bob Reeves. Just as a reminder, because we have a lot on the list, the open mics are just 3 minutes. So, Kathryn.
Hi. Let's see, I'm not sure. Let's see, I've shared the video. Hello? Can you hear me? Whoops. Can you hear me? Hello?
Peggy, you're muted.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Thanks, Roselle. Yes, we can hear you, Kathryn.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so I'm also a friend of Jan Steckel's, and I'm reading here for the first time, and this is a new poem that I just wrote. I just moved from Oakland, California to Brunswick, Maine, and I'm remembering Oakland essentially. The poem is called Tonight Around the Corners of the Bookstore, come bar, come Plaza Fiesta Cumpleaños, are ghosts or memories or flashes of the pleasure palace with a long tunnel of nasturtium and passion flowers, huge dinner bowl leaves and slate pathways, sometimes dinosaur trunks of tree kale, sometimes globes of red pomegranate, sometimes Santa Rosa plums falling to stain the grass and our fingers purple, sometimes wild blackberries, grabbing pricks of our skin when we stole some, sometimes cats stretched across the benches or chairs or watching from a rooftop, dogs vying to catch people's trailing fingers or the full moon face of the ones they crave for a moment bent down, with hands cradling either side of their heads or moving their ears in that delicious way. Sometimes the orange flash of fish through the glass greenery of the tank. Sometimes the son of us perching in groups in the green lush, sipping from wine glasses filled with fruit and tequila. Sometimes, no, always, there was music in the air. Sometimes, no, always, dancing. Some of us careening into some of us meshing. Sometimes, no, always, laughter drifted from the patio or blasted out the kitchen screens. The moon watched sometimes, bending down to trail her fingers on our faces.
Thank
Yeah.
you. I hope you'll enjoy your new East Coast.
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah, certainly being
Yeah.
greeted by the solar eclipse was probably quite
Yeah.
something. So thank
Yeah.
you very much for joining
Thank you very
us.
much. Yeah, thank you for
Hi,
having.
Bob Reeves.
Hi. I've been doing the poem a day thing for National Poetry Month. And here's a poem from last week called Gray. I say death might as well be childhood, where nothing is resolved and everything happens for the first time. Voices condescend, intending comfort, contradicting whatever you say, whatever you think. There's a doorway shaped like many doorways onto a humming purple down flood of stars. They tell you stars are too far off for you to do anything but see, though you know their touch like 1,000 itches, and you circle in place, unsure where to scratch. Death could be the playmate with a face like a cloud drifting out of focus and mouthful of outrageous suggestions. You stand there in its tightening arms, and the voices of the world are evening calls of other people's folks calling an end to your important fun. I say you'll be looking toward a home containing everything you know, and you'll take a step in that direction, and then another step, when sunset is turning the streets and buildings gray. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Just think it's only mid-month now, not even quite that. So bravo. Okay, our next featured reader, and then we have 4 open mics after Sylvia, is Sylvia Byrne Pollacks, who has a new book, What Lasts, which I hope will last in many of our bookshelves for a long time. Sylvia is also the author of Risking It from 2021. She grew up in Batavia, New York, and earned a degree in zoology and a PhD in developmental biology and an MA in psychology. Now a research professor emeritus after a long career in cancer research at UW, Sylvia decided to focus on poetry following a trip to Antarctica in 2007. Her poems have appeared in many print and online journals, including Floating Bridge Review, Crab Creek Review, Quartet Journal, and the Stillwater Review. She's a 2-time Pushcart nominee, won the 2013 Masons Road Winter Literary Award, was a 2019 Jack Star Writer, and a 2021 Mineral School resident. I'm excited to hear from her latest book. Welcome, Sylvia.
Cute. All right. Thank you, Peggy. Yes, thank you to Peggy because she's kept this wonderful thing that Esther started going all these years. And thank you also, Peggy, because when I came back from that trip to Antarctica, somebody told me about this wonderful group at Cancer Lifeline, and being a cancer survivor, I signed right up, and here I am a few years later with 2 books. I also want to thank Red Mountain Press, who have published both of my books, Susan Gardner, my editor, and Devin Ross, the publisher. And I want to thank all of you for coming tonight. I see some friends from all over the country. It's wonderful. Appreciate it. Well, this book, let's see if we can get it to show up. It's hard to get it in focus there. What Lasts? Is in a sense a kind of memoir. So we'll start out with where I am now, and then we'll dip back and forth and throughout my life, various places. So this first poem is called Hold Fast. The Velcro of my mind has lost its stickiness. The myriad small hooks and eyes don't grasp conversations or what I've just read as it did years ago. But forgetting is not the problem. It's failing to see the procession of miracles that stream by me and through me each day. Not a failure of memory, but of attention. Not noting my knees aren't creaking today, neglecting to savor each singular plump blueberry, oblivious to the bees bumbling in the oak leaf hydrangea by the back steps. Between what the bees and the wind scatter, our sidewalk becomes a pollen-paved yellow brick road. I skip along, long-term memories intact. Strong cords anchor me to my past. The book is dedicated to my mom, and I want to read a poem that's dedicated to her. As I said, the whole book is. It's called Praise Song for Hands. When I look at my hands, I think of my mom's, and because they are so alike, love mine despite their disfigurement and pain. As a child, I stared at her hands in awe of the raised blue veins, canals on a distant planet, or chosen route on a AAA map to the unknown. Hands decorated with primitive artwork, worked magic on fabric from J.C. Penney, turned rectangles of cloth into blouses and dresses for my sisters and me. And beyond the practical, she made me a rag doll, floppy jointed, with a blue gingham pinafore and long yellow yarn braids. Her hands braiding my hair in pigtails down my back. Her hands holding my head as I leaned into the toilet to hurl. Hands always, it seemed, in service to others. I know I was a handful at times, yet she always knew how to manage me, taught me not only cooking and sewing, but how to be in a conflicted, confusing world. I remember her under the catalpa tree in our backyard, gathering violets. I pick a small bouquet from my yard today, put it in water on the kitchen windowsill, a tribute to her and to the violet tracery on the backs of our knobbly arthritic hands. So she got me off to a good start. And things were going along as, one hopes they will, with school and marriage and kids and such. And then life threw me a bit of a curveball, but this next poem talks about that a bit. Broken Pattern. 2 kids, 2 cats, 2 cars, 2 homes, a marriage that was first of 2. Grew up with a mom and dad, 2 sisters and a brace of dogs, 2 degrees and men at work, 2 grants to run a research lab. A normal mood, though sometimes blue, a veritable arc of 2s that in my 30s ran aground. Now there were 3, an up, a down, a normal me. Up would seize, transport me briefly through the clouds on raptor wings until, predictably, up let go. I'd plummet down, plunge straight through normal, dumped into dank cellar crypt, left there sometimes for months, until released I rise once more to normal's floor. Well, if that sounds like bipolar 2 to you, you're right. And I was not at all pleased to be told that that was what was going on. To the point where I'm actually, most of my writing about this disorder has been in terms of a persona I created named Letitia. So we're going to hear a couple things from Letitia here, but the other thing that you probably know about diagnosing a disease like that is that there's no lab test. I mean, they can't take a vial of your blood and say, oh, you've got this and that, or like, for Gloria, oh, it's autism, I mean, there are things that get diagnosed with questionnaires. And so when I was, let me see, I find my next page here. Okay. I was talking with Susan Rich about this book when I was working on it a couple of years ago, and Susan told me about the convention that some people have been using of a questionnaire. So you take a questionnaire for whatever thing it is that you're interested in, and then you go from there. So I, of course, didn't just use a straight questionnaire. I had to change a bit, but, and I won't read you all the things, but here we are from Letitia Answers a Diagnostic Questionnaire. This is question 3. Do you sometimes have much more energy than normal? I am an influencer, an astronaut, the queen of everywhere. I join committees, clean cupboards, cook complicated recipes, submit grant proposals, plan trips to foreign countries where everything is tiled in purple and orange. I shop for coordinating clothes and a new suitcase. Always looking for the right container for my stuff, my thoughts, my enthusiasms. Old ones given to Goodwill or pushed to the back of the upstairs under-eave closets. Let mice make nests and feel themselves blessed. Tomorrow's already happened, so make surprises out of now. What was that you asked? Well, it can kind of be fun to be in that state, but one doesn't stay there long, and it's much more typical to spend a lot more time down. And this next one is called Dark Malady. Dark Malady. The full suite of symptoms suggests a hypervirulent strain of flu, fatigue radiating from deep in the marrow, cinching headache, waves of nausea, 12 time zones of jet lag, sight and hearing damped, tongue slowed. She stumbles through thick fog, viscous as chemo brain. A trip to the mailbox requires her inner drill sergeant roaring, left foot, left again. The chatter in her head competes with cycled tunes, perpetual motion motifs with the message, you're worthless, less than 0, a negative number. Some desire still lingers, but it amounts only to this. She wants to hit her head hard against the wall, feel something, anything, counter this smothering nothingness, strike back before this malady demolishes her will to keep living. Well, okay, that started up in the 30s, in my 30s and 40s. And so over the next 4 or 5 decades, how did I cope? Well, that's the way anyone does. Medication, therapy, and the love of a good woman. So this next poem is dedicated to my dear wife, Molly, and it's called Sizzle. You dazzle me, razzle me, Your intellect crackles. Yet when I mythologize you, I'm snapped back to reality by unclosed Ziploc bags. Cracker sog, celery withers. You puzzle me, enigma me, you hear so acutely, yet don't heed explanations why our bras and panties can't be washed with the jeans fabric seizing incisors. You amuse me, raconteur me. I've memorized your exploits, still sometimes you're scandalized by my desire. You sizzle me, frizzle me, batter and waffle me. You syrup, you maple me, oak, elm, you cedar me. You zambonied me, resurfaced me, shaved off my rough edges. I was crazed, now I'm glazed. I'm so glad I proposed. Well, it's been quite a ride, and I can't say I have too many regrets, but if I had regrets, they would be in this next poem if I can find it here. If I had regrets, and who doesn't? It's that I was afraid, forgot to believe in myself, didn't follow Rilke's advice. Go to the limits of your longings. It's too late now to know what might have happened if I'd taken more lovers, challenged more colleagues, breached more professional barriers, spent more time with my children, read more nonfiction and poetry, kept playing my flute and singing. There's no control group for this experiment called my life. But I've no regrets for those times I was able to wriggle out of the mind's intricate mesh chastity belt, woven of tradition, misogyny, mental illness. And I'll close with the poem Libra. I'm an October baby, and it's the best time of year. Libra. The tang of apples splattered to curbside sauce by passing cars on October afternoons lingers into chill nights, insinuates into dreams of travel and death. How many more chances will I be given? How many more will I take? Inching across this high wire, words strung between poles, a line I must trust will be wide enough for my foot. If there are answers, where do they perch? In what seas do they dream? I don't need to grasp them. A glimpse will do. A flash of red feathers, sun glistening on scales. Here at the circus, thrills and elephant dung mixed with straw, sweat, and spun sugar candy. The rings are inviting. Each day I perform acts of faith, acts of yearning. Each day I practice turning away. Thank you.
I'm just going to let us sit with those words a second. Even when you take us to your darkest, lowest point, your words can't help but sizzle. Anybody who can use maple syrup and Zamboni, like in the same poem, we all want to just like take lessons from you. I'm so proud to have been present at the birth of some of those poems, and want to also acknowledge not only, the joy of meeting you at Cancer Lifeline, but a shout out to our friend Roselle Kovitz here, who has kept, I know you're in another group, but has kept a writing group going through the pandemic. And it's been just me the greatest joy to hear some things that I heard at their birth. So, and new work besides. So thank you so much, Sylvia.
Yeah, thank you, Peggy.
Our next open mic person is Becky Bishop White, followed by Julene and then Priscilla.
I have
Becky.
a question. Hi, this is my first time here, thanks to Jan. And thank you, Peggy, for your tutelage throughout all of this and managing being a really excellent MC. So thank you. I have a question. I have a poem that I'd like to share. It's pretty edgy for me, new, but some groups do not allow a little bit of singing. And I just wanted to check to make sure that that's okay.
All I care about is you keeping mostly to the 3 minutes, and you can sing the whole thing if you want.
Okay, thanks. So you're going to get treated to my lovely voice. This is a poem titled "The Currency of Women." Slave wages, get your slave wages right here. Hush, baby girl, my darling, sweet one, my dear. I don't know if I ever will see Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill. But if I do, she'll be worth $16.60 to a white woman like me. How about you? If you're a Black woman, $20 is worth $13.40. Hispanic Latinx, $10.80. Native Indigenous, $10.20. Slave wages, get your slave wages right here. Equal pay day is when a woman catches up with the pay that white men earned the previous year. What is a woman worth? Hush, baby girl, my darling, don't you cry. No matter what your shade, we women are all getting shade. For women in the same occupation as men, 38% of the wage gap is attributed to discrimination. Harriet Tubman, I yearn for your visage on the 20, but the time it will take for women to achieve equality will be plenty. Slave wages, get your slave wages right here. Hush, baby girl, my darling, sweet one, my dear. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely, Becky. What a way to present it. Oh, I should send you to all the schools. And I just don't know of any group that wouldn't allow singing. I think we should have singing every month. So I'd be all for it. So that kind of puts, let's see, Jolene. Will you be singing? You're next.
I liked the singing a lot.
Julene Tripp Weaver.
I think I'll be singing. I'm planning to read one from the local anthology, I Sing the Salmon Home. So, and I was really thrilled. They just had the Bushwick book club do a night from this book, and I was certain that, nobody would do my poem. And somebody did my poem. And I was about going out of my mind when he read my poem. So it's called Salmon or Northwest Pride. Restaurants in the Great Northwest, proud to have salmon on their menu, grilled or baked or pan-fried with a sauce and lemon on the side. Rich in omega-3, fresh pink to red flesh, the coho, the chinook, seasonal, named after a river, after a native tribe. At the Ballard Locks, I learn about their long journey, how we've interrupted their lives with our dams and infiltration, how devoted we are to correction, these locks exemplar. We offer land acknowledgements at poetry readings and socially conscious events. Their lives in danger, we, the mode of extinction, destroy estuaries. Tourists buy smoked salmon at the state gift shop, or find it fresh off a boat from the natives who embody mutual respect for these ancient creatures, their renewal, each year a celebration of life. We've much to learn to change our ways, to appreciate, to restore a world where salmon thrive. We've contaminated them with our debris, our chemicals, ingested when we gorge on our Northwest pride. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, congratulations on having it performed at the
Yeah,
Bushwick. So perfect, thank you. And Julene will be reading in person along with Esther in July. Let's see, I think I said Priscilla was next. Priscilla Long.
Yeah, thank you, Peggy, and thank you, Esther. Esther is there. Thank you, Esther, for 100 years of poetry. Hunger. Out there, a hungry black hole slurps up suns, one per day. Intense light, once thought to be a star, is many stars, a quasar, whirling down the drain of the black hole's cosmic gullet, the way dishwater swirls down. The quasar, its doomed suns, brighter than the brightest star, we name JO5294351. We see it 11 billion years ago. Its black hole, ravenous. Down here, you see hunger in Bewick's wrens hunting insects among the wax myrtle. You see it in crows floating down to a dropped sandwich. I once heard hunger, the yowling next door of a flea-infested collie chained beside its water bowl for a month while its owner explored the museums of Europe. You see it at the food bank over on Roosevelt, the hungry ones carrying bags, wearing terrible socks. Could the black hole's hunger for suns possibly exceed the hunger of young mouths, that hungry first kiss? Thanks.
Thank you, Priscilla. Our next open mic is another new reader, LaMar Mitchell. Welcome.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. This piece is called Orangutan Blues. Followed by droogs on Insta and Facebook, I dissociate out of a general need for bliss. Breathe the mist of the breath of life given by a textbook at the speed of myth. The Al Frankenstein's monster, a liar who was caught lying and lied all the time to other liars. Bubble Galaxy has priors, like formerly existing as a gaseous sphere popped by Alzheimer's. Rhymers are old-timers, people with wise souls who love to critique culture. Into the congressional of elite vultures, scouting the gatekeepers to careen into the machine's ulcers. Pick a rock out of the gumball gallery, anarchy is my unpaved road, dancing towards Willy Wonka's factory, where the bums take roll call amongst sun-glazed trolls. Aged by running the race traced to unshaved toads, I smolder in DMT reptiloid space, cast in the iron lungs brave code. We're all Gandalfs, breakdance battling with Saruman the White. The pizza is radiating hormones as the orcs zero in for the feast of troglodytes. We eat like you eat, talk how you talk, and weaponize how you weaponize. Right-wingers versus leftists, tradition tells the progressive how to redline and gentrify. Armless and legless brainiac outlawing his own voodoo doll usage rates. That's the bad seed girl who pruned my effigy body while I tried to ruminate. Humans' faith in computers, outmoded on the Kabbalah's grid, dropped the dreidel. Claytheus in the foxholes, cannibalized as gunshots as black dots box the angels. Bop to sables on the wings of the griffin, you see the wiring of fuzzy cables. I cut off lines to Alpha 60, sanctioning oxygen to mushroom existence, tabled for the wrangle. In my MK Ultra lab, I'm glam like AbFab with fag hags clotting my bloody cathode tube. Block the televisual info beaming as I broadcast a bag of Marlon Brando cubes. Japanime boobs flash, igniting my Pavlov mechanism, and I dive into the redefinition. Later found on Nibiru's Planet X, scrambling to find a decadimensional organism. Feathered Nixon tarred by the libs and pushed out towards the circle jerk of media cameras. Spot Gaddafi, tackle him, put the hood over his face, and leave him to Gamera. Acura riddled with bullets, still steering towards mankind's total extinction. Looks better when it's the Pope Mobile, vocalizing the doleful allegiance. I'm just an amoeba, and all you are is a rotifer, motoring Lucifer's functioning. Single-celled animal factories breed the ad said casualty for the meteor approaching us monkey kings, muddying and obscuring my oblique angles as elite deity erasure, and you're playing Frankenstein as I rise with my bride of monsters from the cryptid club of ancient minds. Station rhymes occupying same space and time as the 98 humilitary brat, army of refusing saps whose bliss relies on nude missionary sacks. Play the jazz of zoot suits met with lawsuits as the indecency police close in. So I finger the Ginsburg card, the Joker, throw the gambit into the snake pit of Oakland. Thank you.
You will have to make sure and read the comments because you clearly have created sort of a new or a genre, at least new to It's About Time, which, as they're saying, is the science fiction of what do they call it here? Yeah, science fiction rap. So
thank you. I appreciate the
see,
compliment.
we're more than just everyday poetry. So well, this has been such a rich evening. Thank you all so much for being here and so many new voices in our open mic. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording so that we can chat. Hold on.